The sirens had already faded when the neighbors gathered in the street, staring at the lifeless body of an old woman sprawled on the cold pavement. She had been unarmed, frail, clutching nothing but a small grocery bag. One officer muttered about mistaken movement, another about protocol. But the truth was undeniable. A gentle soul was gone, and the silence that followed their gunfire carried more weight than the bullets themselves. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing who's listening. The old woman's name was Eleanor Hayes. Widowed for 20 years, she lived quietly in a modest house on the edge of town. Most knew her for her roses, which bloomed like fire every summer, or her patience with the children who cut across her lawn. She was harmless, but the officers who pulled the trigger didn't know, or didn't care. They left her body where it fell, as if she were just another statistic in a world too busy to grieve. What they didn't know was that Eleanor had a son who had been forged in the crucible of war. His name was Daniel Hayes, and though the neighbors thought him long gone, he had never truly disappeared. He was Delta Force, one of the deadliest commanders the unit had ever produced. His service record was so classified, even his closest friends could never know the half of it. He had vanished into shadows, missions, and scars. And for years, Eleanor believed she'd never see him again. She was wrong. Daniel returned home the next morning, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, boots coated in desert dust. He had been coming to surprise her. Instead, he found yellow tape stretched across her porch and whispers rolling through the crowd. When he pushed past them and saw the chalk outline on the street, something inside him fractured. The officers who had pulled the trigger laughed nervously with each other just a few blocks away, convincing themselves they had done their duty. They hadn't yet realized who Eleanor's son was. They hadn't yet realized that their actions had awakened a storm that Daniel's hands shook, not with fear, but with restraint. He could already picture their faces pressed into the dirt, their badges stripped, their arrogance shattered. Years of discipline warred against a tidal wave of grief. The crowd watched him with wide eyes, whispering as recognition spread. This was Eleanor's boy. This was the soldier she always spoke of with pride. That night, Daniel moved like a phantom. He tracked the officers not with rage, but with precision. He studied their routines, their careless words, their complacency. To Daniel, they were not guardians of justice. They were men who had slaughtered his mother. And the question clawed at him. Was he seeking vengeance, or was he delivering justice? When he finally stepped into the precinct, silence swallowed the room. His presence was like a shadow stretching across every corner, his voice low but unyielding. He didn't need weapons. He carried something heavier, the truth. With witnesses gathered, he laid out every detail of the killing, every contradiction in their story. The weight of his words crushed the officers before a single blow was struck. And when he placed his mother's rosary beads on the desk, even the chief lowered his eyes. The city rose with him. What began as whispers turned into protests, and protests into demands. The officers were stripped of their badges, tried, and convicted, not because Daniel used force, but because he wielded the power of undeniable truth, forged in discipline sharper than steel. The crowd cheered not his wrath, but his restraint at Eleanor's funeral. Daniel stood at the edge of the grave, roses trembling in his hand. He could have let darkness consume him. Instead, he chose to honor her memory by reminding the world that justice, real justice, is not delivered through rage, but through courage, because kindness doesn't vanish. It waits, and it finds its way back. The last thing Daniel saw as the coffin lowered was sunlight catching the petals of her roses, the same ones she once tended with quiet hands. They glowed like fire, as if her spirit had never left at all. That if this story moved you, make sure to subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, do you believe justice can still rise even from the darkest moments?